Gather close, little ones. Mind the shawls and keep your toes out of the hearth. I will tell you a story I promised you. A true one, as true as the lamp glow on these pages. It is a tale about a storm, two brothers, and a world that asked them to be brave in a new way. When your hearts grow uncertain, remember, stories are bridges. We cross them to see farther. Breathe deep. Seek peace. Now, listen. There are places hidden beyond even the bravest cartographer's ink. Islands that do not wish to be found, and waters that will not be charted. On such waters, two brothers traveled with their father, seeking adventure, not knowing the sea had its own plans. Carl said, "Scott, lash that line, hurry!" Scott said, "I've got it. Wait, Carl, the sky." Carl said, "Where's Dad? I can't see him." Scott said, "Dad, Dad!" The storm swallowed their shouts, swallowed the very shape of their boat. The ocean is older than any one life, and sometimes it must shout to be heard. Carl said, "Scott, hold on." Scott said, "Carl, don't." When Scott opened his eyes, he felt sand beneath his cheek, and a sun that felt too close, too kind, to be the same world as the storm that had taken everything else. Scott said, "Hello? Is anyone Carl? Dad?" The shoreline held its breath. The reef threw diamonds of light onto the water. Strange shells gleamed like tiny moons. In the damp sand, a line of tracks curved toward the jungle. A bird's, Scott thought, until he saw how large the prints were. Scott said, "What was that?" He was not alone. A beaked head, hornless and elegant, peered from behind the fronds. A protoceratops, if your picture books are to be trusted. But nothing in his eyes threatened. The creature's frill shifted faintly, catching the light. Scott said, "Hey there, I'm not going to hurt you." The animal stepped close enough for Scott to see the patterned scales and a small harness of woven reeds around its neck, braids threaded with tiny shells. Not wild, then, not in the way he knew. A kind voice said, "Easy, Tavi, easy. Hello, stranger. You look like you've been washed by both the sea and the sky." Scott said, Where am I? Where's my brother, Carl?" The woman said, "My name is Tala. You are on a safe shore, child. If your kin breathe the same wind, we will find them. For now, breathe deep. Seek peace." Scott repeated softly, "Breathe deep. Seek peace." He repeated the words, and his breathing slowed. The protoceratops, Tavi, gently nudged his shoulder, then clicked his beak as if to say, "You're one of us now, whether you know it or not." The path from the beach wandered up through palm shade and ancient stone, then opened onto a sight that would change even the steadiest heart. A city of terraces and cascades, of bridges carved with feathers, and enormous steps shaped to welcome both foot and claw. Waterfall City, we call it. But the water does not simply fall, it sings. A market vendor called out, "Fresh river fruit! Share if you have, learn if you don't. Welcome, traveler, have a slice." Scott said, "Thank you. I'm Scott. I'm looking for my brother Carl. Dark hair, loud voice, maybe as muddy as I am." The vendor laughed and said, "That describes half our apprentices. But keep hope. Our message posts carry more than words. News loves to find its way home here." Scott said, Did that dinosaur just talk?" A woman named Tala said, "In a manner of speaking. Their voices have shapes. We learn to hear them. Sometimes they learn to hear us. Watch your step. The streets belong to all feet." And then, as if the city had been waiting for the right moment to breathe, a tall, silver-haired man appeared, eyes as steady as river stones. Arthur Dennison, scholar, explorer, friend to the enormous and the timid alike. He said, "You must be Scott." Scott said, "How did you know?" Arthur said, "Because you look as the newly arrived always do. Half wonder, half worry. I'm Arthur Dennison. Breathe deep." Scott said, "Seek peace." Arthur said, "Good. That's the first lesson that matters. You are among people who will help you. Come, we'll post word and set a path to finding Carl." Scott said, "Thank you." Arthur moved like a man who trusted the ground under him. He led Scott past a line of hadrosaurs wearing bright silk sashes, each with a child perched carefully on its back, learning balance and the patience that friendships between species always demand. Arthur said, "Here we record news, arrivals, questions, help offered and needed. Ink and empathy, Scott. That's the code." Scott said, "Doesn't anyone panic about me? About someone strange?" Arthur said, "There are rules, a good kind. We honor them because they keep us from fear's small cages. Come, the city wants to show you something."
Arthur brought Scott to terraces where books were not only kept, but lived with. Pages turned by claws and hands alike. A Triceratops elder shifted his weight carefully as a child traced letters along his brow horn with a brush, then set the brush aside with a shy bow. The librarian Silas said, "Arthur, and you found a newly arrived. Welcome, young one. What's his name?" Arthur said, "Scott, we're searching for his brother." Silas said, "We'll set the scribes humming then, and the messengers too. Here, Scott, this is where our oldest maps rest their bones. See the margins? Notes from those who came before you. Nothing here is ever alone." Scott said, "Do people leave? Go back?" Arthur said, "Some try. The sea has its own choices, but most find what they didn't know they were seeking. Family, meaning, a world that listens back." Scott said, "I don't know if Carl will listen." Silas said, "He will when the right voice calls. Let's make sure he hears." They left the city's music for the undersong of the forest. Ferns old enough to remember other continents, cycads like lanterns. Arthur taught Scott how to read a trail the way some read a poem. Arthur said, "Notice the bends in these fronds. Something broad, tail low. Move your palm just above the ground. Feel the cooler patch? Weight rested there recently. A stegosaur, perhaps, slow-moving, unbothered. It tells us the path is peaceful." Scott said,
You can tell all that from a fern? Arthur said, from 1,000 small things agreeing on the same story. Keep your eyes soft. Let the world introduce itself before you name it. A messenger named Naira arrived and said, "Hold a moment. Field message. Arthur, slate for you, from the western gullies." Arthur read the message and said, "Ah, young human found near Redstone Arch is loud. Requests a Scot." "Loud, Scott said, "Carl! That has to be Carl!" Arthur said, "We go west then. With gratitude, Naira." Naira said, "Breathe deep." And Scott and Arthur answered together, "Seek peace." They crossed a stream over stones so smooth they seemed like eggs waiting to hatch. An ankylosaur lifted his armored head to watch them pass, blinked sleepily, and returned to crushing a fallen palm with a sound like distant drums. Scott said, "Are we safe?" Arthur said, "Safety is a conversation, Scott. We don't demand it. We build it together. Step wide of those burrows. The small ones don't love surprise." Scott said, "Sorry, I didn't mean." Arthur said, "You apologized. That is the most important tool you'll carry." Meanwhile, Carl had also wrestled his way from the sea's stern embrace and had wandered through rocks the color of old clay, sun on his shoulders like a weight and a blessing. Carl called out, "Scott? Scott?" His voice echoed back from the red stone walls. From the shadow of a red stone arch stepped a creature as broad as a wagon, tail clubbed like an oar made for a giant, an ankylosaur matron with eyes wise as pond water. Carl froze, not from fear, but from the surprise of recognizing gentleness in a shape he thought danger wore. Carl said, "Hi, I come in peace? I don't have anything you'd want, unless you eat pockets." The great creature snorted softly and nudged a canteen toward him. Carl said, "Water? Are you giving this to me?" When he drank, he tasted more than water. He tasted the shock of being cared for by something the world had told him to fear. A woman named Sachi appeared and said, "By the red arch, there you are. Hello, wayfarer. I am Sachi, keeper of the West Gullies. I think you belong to a Scot." Carl said, "I do. You've seen him?" Sachi said, "News says he's searching with Arthur Dennison. You fell into good company. This is Mura. She considers lost things her specialty." Carl said, "Mura, thank you. I'm Carl." Sachi said, "Come, we'll set a simple pace. Walk beside Mura. She hates it when people race ahead. And you can tell me everything you think you know about dinosaurs, and then listen while our neighbors correct you kindly." Carl said, "I probably deserve that." Sachi said, "Every one of us did at first." At the place where 3 paths braided into one, Sachi raised a bright scarf, a traveler's sign of safe passage. Then she set a small whistle to her lips and made a sound like a question a bird might ask. Arthur called out, "Sachi? And a companion I take to be Carl?" Carl shouted, "Arthur Dennison? Scott's told me all about—" "Wait, is that Scott? Scott!" Scott cried, "Carl, you're okay." Carl said, "You're okay." Arthur said, "And balance is restored. Breathe deep, both of you. no more shouting at the sky. Scott said, "We were getting to that part." Carl said, "I met a dinosaur. She lent me water, which I plan never to forget." Sachi said, "Mora chooses well whom to help. And now we let your heart sit down in your ribs a while. The city waits with a meal and questions." I have never known a table that did not love a story, especially when told by people who just learned how big the world is and how kindly it can be fierce.
On a terrace where sunlight collects like a habit, the community gathered. Dinosaurs and humans at shared tables, dishes tall and low, food served with both hands and claws. Scott and Carl found themselves overwhelmed and seen. The vendor Joram said, "Fresh river fruit again and sea salt greens. Don't let them go cold. They taste better before you can name them." Scott said, "Thank you for everything." Carl said, "Is there a way to pay you back? I don't have, anything." The librarian Silas said, "We do not buy or sell survival, young one. We trade what we can do, what we can learn. What are you good at?" Carl said, "Getting into trouble?" Everyone at the table laughed. Arthur said, "Then perhaps you can learn to direct that trouble towards solving problems. We have cranks that stick and roofs that leak, and small ones who climb what they shouldn't." Scott said, "I can draw. Not well, but I like it." Silas said, "A library loves such hands, and maps appreciate new eyes. Stay long enough and you will know every bend of the river by its scent." A great elder Parasaurolophus named Elder Mara raised her voice in a long, mellow, rising note like a question song. Arthur translated, "Elder Mara wonders whether you have learned our greeting yet." And the brothers said together, "Breathe deep, seek peace." Elder Mara answered with a two-note phrase, and nearby children hummed along, proud. The brothers smiled, not because they had no fears, but because their fears had been invited to dinner and given a chair. Days do not hurry in Dinotopia. They unfold like a fern. In the morning, Arthur took the brothers to the bridge where the city's water makes lace of sunlight. Arthur said, "Watch the workers there. 2 humans, a Lambeosaurus. See how the raft is tied with 1 knot made for hands and 1 for hoof? We plan for each other's shapes. It saves time later." Scott said, "Planning for someone else first? It's different." Arthur said, "It is the simplest form of respect. It is also more efficient than most people think." Carl said, "And those in the sky? Are those giant birds?" Powerful wing beats passed overhead, casting a great shadow. Arthur said, "Skyback's riders, friends with wings. They deliver messages, scout the high passes. No one rides alone. All flights are pairings of trust." Scott said, "Could we?" Arthur said, "One day, perhaps. First you learn the ground's language. Then you ask the sky politely if it has room for you." On the bridge's parapet, a carving of a small dinosaur and a human reaching for the same cup. It had been there long before Arthur or I or even Elder Mora. We keep such images clean. We hold them to remind us who we said we would be. Children passed by, reciting softly as they walked.
Do one thing for the common good. Learn each day. Give thanks. Breathe deep. Seek peace. Arthur led the brothers to a courtyard of engraved stones, sentences chiseled in many scripts. Some you could read with your eyes, some you felt with your palms. Arthur said, "We call this the Code Court. When two voices disagree loudly enough to shake the rafters, we settle our feet here and remember the first agreements." Carl said, "What if someone breaks the code?" Arthur said, "Then we mend. Sometimes that means a stern word. Sometimes it means a day of listening while helping someone you thought you disliked to carry water. Our justice is not a cage. It is a garden. It takes work." Scott said, "Why are the dinosaurs so kind?" Arthur said, "They are not kind because they are dinosaurs. They are kind because we asked them to be, and because we said we would be kind in return. It took generations. We teach the young, the old enforce gently, and we allow for mistakes. That is how a world becomes itself."
It was in the market, where distraction is a language, that Carl, in his curiosity, reached up to feel a string of shells. A simple thing, a simple motion. It tugged the wrong knot. A canopy swung. Canvas came flumping down. Fruit tumbled everywhere. Carl cried, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." The vendor Mira said, "Who dares bring rain to my peppers?" Oh, newcomer mischief. There is always one. Scott said, "He didn't. We can..." Mira said, "Hush. We all learn knots the hard way. You will help me sort. And while we sort, you will listen to me tell the story of how this canopy saved my brother in a heat wave. And then I will listen to you tell me of your storm. Fair?" Carl said, "Fair." Hands sorted produce, a broom swished. Small chuckles rose as children joined in. A spill became a lesson. Embarrassment became a kind of thread. By the time the canopy was straight again, Carl's shoulders had come down from his ears. Arthur saved for last the place I know best, the old hall beneath the city where the stones keep memory. We call it the Whispering Ruins, not because they speak in words, but because if you are still enough, the air shares stories with you. Arthur said, "These rooms belonged to people who built before we learned to live easily with our neighbors. They made mistakes, so did we after them. We write our history to remember where the paths go soft." Scott said, "It's beautiful. These carvings." Carl said, "Look, Scott, dinosaurs and people together, lifting a beam." Arthur said, "We have always needed each other more than we knew. When you forget, the stones will remember for you." Scott said, "Arthur, will we ever go home?" Carl said, "Scott." Arthur said, "There are many kinds of home. The sea that brought you may yet carry you again, if it wishes. But you are not adrift here. You have anchors. If you stay, you will be part of something. If you go, you will carry us with you. That is what a home is, a thing you carry."
good thing sometimes to be held by a silence older than your questions.
As the sun gathered itself to slide behind the hills, Scott and Carl stood on a terrace that looked across a gentle plain. Herds moved like commas in a sentence. The earth was still writing. A young skyback stood with its rider, practicing the patient art of not flying. Scott said, "Carl?" Carl said, "Yeah?" Scott said, "Do you think we'll ever get home?" Carl said, "I don't know. I thought home was a street and a porch light and Dad's laugh. Now, I think it's this too. The way that ankylosaur, Mora, looked at me. The way people here made room for us at their table before they knew our names." Scott said, "It scares me that I don't want to leave." Carl said, "Me too. But maybe it's okay to want two good things at once." Elder Mara approached, her breath warm, and sang a gentle rising tone like a lullaby beginning. Arthur translated. She says, "The sky is vast enough for two homes. That is how wings work. They fold and unfold as needed." Scott said, "I think I understand." Carl said, "I love that the dinosaurs are poets." Arthur said, "We all are, when we tell the truth kindly." Night fell with the soft authority of a blanket. The city did not sleep. Cities rarely do, but it rested. The brothers returned to the guest house, where the door frames have bite marks at knee height from small ones who measured themselves when no one watched. Scott said, "Carl?" Carl said, "Hmm?" Scott said, "If we do stay, I want to learn to speak like they do. Not just the words, the sound underneath." Carl said, "We can. We'll mess up. We'll fix it. We'll eat a lot of river fruit." Scott said, "Deal." There was a knock at the door. Arthur entered and said, "Forgive the late hour. I brought a gift. Two, actually." He set down 2 parcels. Arthur said, "From Silas, the librarian, 2 sketchbooks for drawing what you cannot say yet. And from Sachi, 2 little bells. They tie to your belts when you walk the forest, so the small ones know you're coming." Carl said, "Thank you, Arthur, for everything you've done. I was scared. I still am, but less." Arthur said, "Being brave has very little to do with not being afraid. Rest now. Tomorrow the river asks to meet you properly, and someone very small wishes to teach you how to ask an ankylosaur for a story." Scott said, "Good night." Arthur said, "Breathe deep." And the brothers said together, "Seek peace." You've been good listeners, all of you. I see your eyes wide as lanterns. You want to know what happened next. Did they stay? Did the sea whisper their names and pull them home? I will tell you this. There are stories that belong to the people living them, and I will not take theirs from them. But I can tell you, the world they found did not vanish when they looked away. It met them again each morning. It gave them choices. It forgave them their early clumsiness. It asked them to be gentle with themselves and others. And slowly,
The fear that woke them at night began to come less often as a shout and more as a question you could answer with a friend's hand. Do you hear the falls? They sound the way they did the day I arrived, a long time ago. Older than many of your grandparents, younger than the hills. The wind still tastes of stone and fern. And in the market, if you tug the wrong knot, Mira will still make you sort peppers while she tells you you're not the first and won't be the last. Such is the way of kindness. It forgives in advance, then teaches.
Some would tell you our greatest secret is the size of our neighbors, or the hidden paths that keep our island tucked away from hurried maps. But that is a child's answer, and I do not speak to children as if their ears are small. The true secret is this: we listen to what is alive around us, and we choose to be changed by it. Dinosaurs, rivers, each other. We choose, and then we choose again the next day and the next. That is a secret any place could borrow if it wished. As the sun began to return, Scott and Carl climbed the steps to the upper terrace. They'd learned the city's rhythm just enough to put their feet down in time with it. The mountains wore thin scarves of cloud. The river wrote its bright signature across the valley. Below, dinosaurs moved with the kind of grace you learn from long friendships. Scott said, "Carl?" Carl said, "Yeah." Scott said, "Thank you for not giving up on finding me." Carl said, "I made a promise. Not the kind you say out loud, the kind you feel in your bones. Also, Mura would have clubbed me gently if I'd tried to quit." Scott said, "I want to help here. Maybe not forever, but now." Carl said, "Me too. Let's learn to tie the right knots before lunchtime?" Scott said, "Deal." Arthur appeared and said, "Then you have your marching orders. Today, Scott with me at the library. Carl, Sachi has a roof that needs your courage. No leaping without looking." Carl said, "I'll look, then leap carefully." Arthur said, "A fine adjustment." They looked out across the terraces one more time, hands resting on the warm stone. The storm had torn their former life in two, but the island had not simply mended the break. It had made the edges beautiful. That is the way with places that tell the truth. They do not hide your scars, they crown them. And so, little ones, do you see? The beginning of a story is often a storm. The middle is a walking. The end, well, ends make poor doors, but excellent windows. When you go to sleep tonight, say the words that hold this place the way the falls hold the river. Breathe deep, seek peace. Then remember to make room beside you at the table tomorrow for someone who hasn't learned them yet. Welcome to Dinotopia, again and always. Not because you were born here, but because you choose it each day. That is the adventure we are all still having. This has been Audio Adventures of Dinotopia.